minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Kush'S Korner here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Tonight is part 2 with Terry Cullen of the Dragonwood Wildlife Conservancy, and our main topic tonight is going to be the African slender snouted crocodile, one of the most incredible reptile species in the entire world, and a species that Terry is most certainly, he wouldn't let me call him an expert, but whatever is expert adjacent is what I'll call Terry on that topic. Later on in the episode, we will also be doing a little bit of an introduction into reptile nutrition and some of the misnomers surrounding it in the current day and age. But before we get into all that, as always, USARC. So USARC is the organization that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, and to enjoy this lifestyle that we all love so much. Check out usarc.org for all of the information you need to know about the organization. And if you are not already a member, please look into becoming a member of USARC. The lowest tier started only about $5 a month. As a community, we have strength in numbers, so the more people that are behind the cause, the better. Once again, check out usarc.org for all the information you need to know. And tonight we are brought to you by Mark Bailey of Mark Bailey Reptiles, one of the OGs in the ball python industry, somebody who has been involved with reptiles for longer than probably a lot of us have been alive. Big pioneer in the rodent field as well, somebody who I consider a mentor and someone I'm glad to be friends with. But if you are in the ball python market, I highly recommend checking out Mark Bailey Reptiles for some of the absolute best stuff in the industry today. Without a doubt, again, Mark Bailey Reptiles, you can check out his listings on MORPH Market and wherever else you can find your ball pythons. And we were also brought to you by Elijah Armas of Juggernaut Reptiles, one of the leaders in the blood python and short-tail python market here in the United States. That they also work with ball pythons, green anacondas, Sanzinia, and more. But particularly if you are in the market for bloods and short-tails, definitely check out Juggernaut Reptiles for some of the best stuff in the industry. And last but most certainly not least, we are brought to you by the Reptile Super Show. The next Reptile Super Show in Pomona, California is coming up just in a couple of short weeks, January 11th and 12th, the Pomona Convention Center. I will be there. I'll be vending with MJ at the Trap Exotics booth. Some pretty cool stuff to show all of you guys. Some of the absolute best people in the industry are at the show. It is arguably the largest show in the U.S. and a high amount of diversity considering the size of the show. If you are not just a ball python, crested gecko fan, this is a show for you. There is a lot of diversity out there on the West Coast from some great breeders. And like I said, the best part of the shows for me are all the people. Some of the best people in the industry, some of your favorite breeders, keepers, etc. will be there. So check out reptilesupershow.com for all of the information about tickets, hotels, etc. It's all there and it's coming up very soon. And I hope to see as many of you there as possible. All right, here we are. It is time again. Thank you to everybody who is tuned in currently. If you are here on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. A new podcast drops every single night of the week here from a host of different hosts. Probably should have thought that phrasing through, but oh well, we're live. But hosts that cover many different topics, some of the best in the game. There is a little bit of a holiday break going on, but once we are on the other side of these holidays, we are going to be back to our regularly scheduled daily reptile programming. If you are an audio-only type of person on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, etc., subscribe, 5-star review, all that good stuff would be very much appreciated. And yeah, here we are. For anybody who is in the live chat tonight, any comments that you have, questions along the way, on topic, off topic, whatever it may be, feel free to leave a comment and we will gladly go over and answer your questions. But without further ado, let's bring Terry on the show. Good evening, Terry. How are things?
Hey, Stephen. I could tell you the truth and depress both of us, or just say wonderful. I had a boiler go out in one of our buildings, a very large boiler that I had installed about 35 years ago. And let me tell you, what fun it is. What fun it is.
Can only imagine so. Can only imagine.
Yeah, I've been working on that for about 5 days now, trying to get heat back in that building correctly. Luckily, we've got enough electronic heat to keep everybody happy for the time being. But yeah, so much for that.
Well, I'm glad you were able to take the time away from that problem to be able to share some knowledge tonight here on the show and talk about one of, I presume, your favorite reptile species, and one that I've had the incredible privilege of interacting with for a period of that being the African slender snouted crocodile.
Well, we're going to talk about the African slender snouted croc. And again, I want to remind the listeners to please ask questions, please make comments. Mm-hmm. We want you to be involved in this. Definitely. It's important to Stephen and I to be able to find out what you're thinking. As long as it's even halfway reasonable, we will address it. We will do our best to come up with answers for you. And all else fails, Steve and I can just lie about it and leave it at that. No, that's just kidding.
Yep.
So anyhow,
whatever makes the show go on.
Yeah. The African slender snouted croc. Crocodilus, what? Do we know?
I mean, I would say cataphractus. What should we say?
Yeah, except it isn't crocodilus anymore, is it?
No, it is not.
Okay, what do you know what it is?
Mechastops cataphractus?
Mechastops cataphractus, yep. There is allegedly 2 species of the African slender snouted croc. I noticed years ago that there were differences in some of the animals from various areas. They are a very cryptic species. They have never been particularly abundant. They are the oldest known species of crocodilian. Their record goes back farther than any other extant species of croc. That is quite a ways. That's like older than your grandmother. You remember her, right, Stephen?
Vaguely.
Okay. Yes, Mrs. Vaguely. They are remarkable animals in many ways. They're unusual even for a crocodilian. And there's almost nothing really known about them. I've gotten to know a fair bit just because of the animals that we have in captivity. Our animals are in a setting where not much is out there to bother them. And they can kind of act and be what they want to be. But one of the things that just always amazed me about the African slender snouted crocs is I hate to say it this way because I'm going to have 321 people jump down my throat, but they've got a glint in their eye. You look at them, they're looking back at you. It's like mischief. I'm ready to do mischief. I'm ready to surprise you.
That is true.
And let's give just some general information about them. They top out size-wise at about, I'll use American, I suppose. We should stay away from metrics here.
America, damn it.
The females will top out about 8 feet, and the males, I have what I think is the largest one in captivity right now, and he's a little over 11 feet in length. And they're what we would call a medium-sized crocodilian. Their behavior, what we know of it, comes from bits and pieces of observations from various people, myself included, and some of the people who work for me. We have people with our animals 24/7. So at 3 in the morning, I can probably tell you what crocodile XYZ is doing. This has allowed us to see some of the changes that take place at night and at different times of the day, the interactions that take place, the vocalizations. They are not particularly vocal compared to, say, the Siamese Crocs, which are just out and out blabbermouths. Siamese Crocs they really are. They chatter away, oink, oink, grunt, grunt. But when they do make noise, they've got quite a good roar to them. And they also do a chattering noise. And the other one that they're involved with on a regular basis is jaw clapping. And it is loud. I mean, they just think it's the greatest thing in the world. When you're walking by their pen, you can't see them. Next thing you hear is this tremendous clap. And anybody who's not used to working with them usually has to go and change underwear at that point. They are remarkably quick crocodiles. They're very, very fast.
Yeah.
They bask, I would say, this is sort of an important thing. You don't see it in the books very often, but the basking times and the basking amount that they do, they're sort of in the median range. They bask about the same as, for instance, the Siamese Crocs do. They have similar diurnal patterns to what the Siamese Crocs do. And we're throwing the Siamese in here just for fun because they are not closely related at all to the Cataphractus or the Mechastops group. At night, they're extremely active. They're also extremely active during the day. When do they sleep? They seem to sleep in bits and pieces.
Okay.
And they also seem to sleep in the mornings. So they kind of follow me, I guess. I kind of sleep in the mornings as well. Sometimes I even get up and do things like talk on the internet here, which, by the way, I want to thank Stephen for having us. It's really something I should have done a long, long time ago and started doing a long, long time ago. Getting on the internet, talking to people, and I've stayed a bit clandestine throughout my life and stayed with my work. And it's about time that I stopped being clandestine. And I mentioned this at our first broadcast last time around. If you've missed it, go back and see it. 2 hours of unicorn bunnies and fluff. No, just kidding. No unicorns.
No.
Hey, it's the holidays, man. It's the holidays. Back to our Cataphractus. I'm going to give you an anecdote, and this little anecdote is very important. It may seem like not very much, but it gives you a real insight into the remarkable personalities of these animals. We have a number of the Cataphractus. We've bred them. By the way, they're certainly one of the most difficult crocs to breed.
Okay.
And do a good job of breeding. We have so far bred them, I think, 5 times or 6 times.
Wow.
One night we were down looking at the pens in fall. It was early fall. And we kept hearing this weird sound. And it was really hard to describe. It was sort of shushing and crunchy all at the same time. We looked around, couldn't see anything. Couldn't see a thing. The next few nights we heard the same noise, and we noticed that it got larger when we got closer to the pen where we have a couple of the big male Cataphractus.
Okay.
But they weren't, we couldn't see them. Nothing was going on that we could see. The pens, by the way, are pretty well covered up in green and other plant goodies. During the summer, we knock it all down during the wintertime so they can get much better basking. So about the 6th day that we went down there, and we're just wondering what the hell. We thought that something had gone wrong with the water source, and that one of our pipes was spraying or leaking and hitting leaves or something. It was just such a weird sound. And my manager and I were there, and all of a sudden this tree falls down, and it falls down in the cataphractus pen. We go over there, shine the light on it, and there's cataphractus with bits and pieces of tree in its mouth, and a little look on his face of saying, "Damn, didn't think I could do that." It was remarkable. It turned out she had been sawing away at this for several days, and she just didn't. She wanted to redecorate. You know, you can keep better homes and gardens. She wants swamp and ponds, and it was amazing. And I've seen them do that since, where they will find things that they want changed, and they just go about it. The posterior edge of their teeth, like most crocodilians, has something of a saw edge. And I've seen New Guinea crocs do this as well.
Okay.
But sawing down your own lumber, my God, you know, hello?
Yeah.
That's amazing behavior. That is absolutely amazing behavior. And appreciate the fact that, you know, after she did it, she just kind of looked back and was one of those, yeah, you know, got that done and out of the way. So we went in there the next day, of course, and picked it up, cleaned it up, and left her to her things. But after that, I also did some experiments with various objects and things that I would put in and see what they would do with them. Mm-hmm. And they are forever changing their pens around. They're not big on digging, although they do some digging. But when it comes to keeping their pens the way they want them to be, it's really an interesting thing to see these guys working at what they want. They've got preferences. They have absolute preferences for things that they like, things that they don't like, or things that just need to be in a different place. So much for feng shui and crocodiles.
What were the other things that you would put in the enclosure to experiment with?
Just pieces of wood and things that had color to them, and that did not include people, by the way. I'm going to get in trouble. I just know it. We used some of these horse balls, you know, the real heavy ones with a handle on them.
Okay.
The toys for horses.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those ended up outside the pen pretty quickly. I didn't want to try that again. They did not like those.
Okay.
Some sort of incursion on them. But if you spend enough time watching these guys, you see a whole different animal. Subtle, as with most crocs, but even more subtle than most crocs. Our oldest male, and we have paperwork to bear this out, was brought into the United States in 1903.
Wow.
Do the math. I'm sorry, 1913.
Okay.
1913. And he is healthy as a horse. He's still breeding just fine. He looks like a very large, very old animal, but sure. His teeth are beautiful. He's in great shape. And he is never happier than when he can snap those jaws and scare the living bejesus out of somebody.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, when you got that animal, or I guess not when you got the animal, but when they did that import in 1913, was there an estimate of how old that animal was at the time?
I was told by somebody in the chain, it was a zoo that originally imported him, okay, that it was about a 4-foot long animal.
Okay.
So I would gauge that as probably a 5-year-old, something like that. Normal growth for a cataphractus that somebody isn't feeding way too much to.
Right.
Yeah. So again, do the math, and you have an elder statesman.
Yes, absolutely.
In the crocodiles.
Is there any way there to have been accounts of how old these animals in the wild could have been?
One of the great mysteries about crocodilians.
Yeah.
We know almost nothing about longevity. We've got a lot of anecdotal this, that, and the other thing, but the problem is that so many crocs die of slow inanition where it's diet related,
Sure.
and they slowly lose the things that they need to keep themselves going. And this is where you get this idea of senescence for crocodilians, where they get old and fall apart and die. No, they don't get old and fall apart and die. They get old, but what happens is they lose some of the essential micronutrients and they start falling apart.
Yeah.
And I realize falling apart is not a necessarily scientific term, but we're not here to do heavy duty science tonight. We're here to enjoy ourselves during the holiday season and say hi to the cataphractus.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, at least in my experience with a couple of your younger ones, what was that the species was disproportionately strong compared to other similarly sized crocodilians.
You are absolutely correct in that. They are really powerful. They're slender, but they're powerful. The jaw clap that they do would shatter the jaws of most other animals. Every time it happens, I have this idea of I'm going to have to be going in and gluing them back together again. They can withstand an enormous snap of those jaws. It's like a thunderclap.
Yeah.
And again, they do it, so supposedly as a warning, but I'll tell you, Old Paw, as he's called, that's PAW. If I had to get all anthropomorphic about it, I'd say he was having a good time because of the way he does it, the timing of when he does it, and the fact that if it's a new person, they're going to get jaw clapped.
That's funny.
Yeah, I mean,
it wouldn't shock me considering how intelligent these animals are, and especially one that's been around as long as he has and observed as many patterns as he has.
And if he's looking for food, he lets you know about that too. Okay. They can do something that the Tomistomas also do, only on rare occasions, but it's almost a quack. It's a completely different vocalization.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that's the food motivated, or I guess trying to communicate with
for him. For him it seems to be food motivated. Okay. Give me fresh rats or else.
Yeah. Very interesting.
One of the things that people don't do anymore, the people who used to work in the museums were really big on morphometrics and looking at the animal as a whole, the dynamics of the animal. And if you look at the cataphractus, you look at an animal that is exceedingly aquatic.
Okay, yeah.
Look at the tail. The tail is broadened out and made for power. If you look at the feet and the webbing, they've got very serious webbing and relatively long feet, which means they're going to be fast and can move incredibly effectively in the water. 2 pushes with the feet or 1 slip with the tail, and they're moving. Yeah. And they're moving quickly. In some ways, they resemble the Tomistomas in terms of habits and so forth. Yeah. There is a great deal of thought these days that the Tomistomas may be their closest relatives.
Okay.
Hard to say. We need somebody who's a serious systemicist from, like the 1930s or 40s to sit down with some of the modern techniques and see what we're really doing. I would love to see some 24-hour-a-day filming of these animals and more than one person looking at it. Unfortunately, I have not had the time to do it nor the resources, but with many of these crocs, I would love to have 24/7 film on them and see exactly who's doing what when. We see a lot more than most because, as I say, we have people on duty 24/7, and they're going, especially this time of year when we're checking to make sure the pumps are on and making sure the water temperatures are not going below acceptable levels.
Yeah.
So moving onward here and sort of backward for a moment, I'm going to interrupt what we're talking about with the cataphractus. And because it reminded me of something. I was on an airplane not long ago, and I had received a book in the mail that I had ordered. A gentleman put together a book regarding things that we should know better about crocodiles. And I was expecting, I guess, I don't know what I was expecting, but I didn't expect what I got. And I have to say that I don't want to mention names. I don't want to be here trashing somebody, but I really wish people who are enthusiastic about crocodilians would take the time to seek out several things. One of them is a mentor. Two is legitimate information on some of these animals rather than fanciful stuff.
Sure.
The first page that I opened, when I opened the book, I just randomly opened the book and looked at. The first thing I opened to was something that Pete Brzaitis and I worked on many years ago. And this, it was listed as this mystery thing having to do with the tearing in the eyes. We know exactly why the eyes tear. We know exactly the mechanism for it, and it's an amazing mechanism. To this day, very few people know about it because no one bothered to ask us. Pete and I found it almost simultaneously. It's kind of like the Edmund Hillary story and going up the mountain, who got to the top first. But we think we were within days of each other, so we sort of gave mutual credit for it. Pete Brzaitis used to be the curator at Bronx Zoo and also at Central Park Zoo in New York.
Okay.
Truly a croc lover, a good researcher, smart man, and very much a gentleman. He really is quite a guy. These are the people that need to go into the books one way or another, whether it's through another person or through some of their writings or what have you.
Yeah.
We can't keep throwing stuff out there because we want it to be there. We can't keep claiming things because we like it that way. I'm sure that this fellow intended, or I should say was well-intentioned, but there's just a raft of problems with that book. And he could have avoided a lot of that by going around and interviewing some of the right people.
Yeah.
On his defense, or at his defense, is the difficulty of finding the right people, which is certainly significant.
Yeah.
But that's my little sort of non-advertisement for today. He'll probably know who he is and so on. And if he ever wants to contact me, he's more than welcome to. If he happens to get in touch with you, you can put him onto my numbers, so forth. But I would love to see some good books come out that have authority behind them. And by authority, I mean people who really know what they're talking about. It seems to be more and more scarce. More and more books about morphs and less about reality.
Yeah.
Okay, back to our mecha stops.
Yes.
Most zoos have almost no luck breeding these guys. I believe the first zoo that I recall was Miami Metro Zoo, and
Okay.
the gentleman there at the time was Bill Ziegler. And Bill and I have been friends for many, many years. He's a good fellow. He's a good researcher, and certainly does well by the crocodilians. His first breeding, I never got clear information as to how it transpired because I think there were just too many people that were involved in the care and so forth of the animals at Miami Metro. They borrowed 2 animals from me at one point. they wanted to get another breeding pair going, so I gave them a male and a female, unrelated.
Hmm.
And it taught us some serious lessons about these guys.
Okay.
First of all, when I brought them to Miami Metro Zoo, they were off exhibit. They had a fairly large enclosure with a pond in it. And in true crocodilian fashion, they were in that pond and sunk to the bottom as quickly as they possibly could.
Yeah.
They were scared, of course.
Sure.
I gave them the information for diet. I gave them some of the supplements that I wanted them fed, and we kind of left it at that. Every so often, I'd get an update, and the update was mostly, we haven't seen them in weeks. And the only place they did get to see them was when they were on the TV. They had cameras in that pen, so they would see the animals when they weren't there. As soon as they were anywhere near the pen, the animals were gone.
Yeah.
They were in the water and down in the bottom as quickly as they could go. Finally, after 3 years, and I think it was about 3 years, and no babies, no nothing, I said, time to pull the plug and we'll bring them back. And by the way, both these animals were proven breeders already. They had bred for us.
Okay.
I got to the zoo to pick them up, and two of the folks who worked in the reptile department were saying, we're going to have to drain the pond. That's the only way we ever see them, is if we drain it out, and then they'll head for the bushes. And I said, whoa, hang on a second. Before we go through all of this and take up most of the afternoon, let's try something else. So I went over to the enclosure. I sat down, and by the way, no one should take what I'm telling you as being the correct way for someone to work with these animals. I've worked with these animals all my life, and this particular pair, as with many of our animals, I knew very well, and they knew me very well. And you need to take that very seriously. Don't, whatever you do, engage in risky behavior with crocodilians or any other animals. It's always the animal that suffers.
Yeah.
Either reputation-wise or physically, or they kill the animal or something, because you were too stupid to realize that the animals take the brunt of whatever goes on, whether it's a venomous animal or anything else. Your first bite could be your last bite, so don't get bitten, which is what I tell them, people who work for me constantly, except for one who I've never had to tell that to. She's just way too good. So back to my story. I sat down there and I called up the two Crocs. By that, I mean using their names, called them. And for about, I'd say 3-4 minutes, nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, the female's up and poking her nose out. She looked at me and looked at the other two people who were behind me. And I asked them to step back a bit and get out of the enclosure. And then I think it probably took another 3-4 minutes before the male came up. But she came out and basically sat next to me like she's done many a year. I had an extremely close relationship with this animal because when she first came in out of Africa, she came in with horrible gangrene in one of her legs. I don't know what they did to that poor thing, but most people would have taken the leg completely off. I was not about to sacrifice that leg completely. I did some work on it, and we managed to save most of the leg. She lost the paw, but most of the leg was saved, and I put a pad in so that it would be comfortable for walking, a PTFE pad, Teflon pad.
Okay.
And she healed well, and she was able to dig and do all the things that a crocodile should do.
Wow.
At any rate, the bottom line in all of this is the better your training with the Crocs, the easier it is on them and you. Any time of the day, I could walk up to her and pick her up. She was about, at that point, a little under 8 feet.
Okay.
She was a good sized female. But again, they're not that heavy. There were many times when I picked her up and had to pick her up to medicate her when all of this stuff went on. And she got used to me just lifting her up and walking off with her, and no big deal. No, that's not good practice. No, everybody shouldn't do that.
Right.
Half the battle here is trying to make people understand that there is much more going on with these animals than you think. They are much faster than you think. That's something to also be very, very aware of. Crocodilians are approximately 3 times faster than human beings when it comes to your muscle twitch. No matter what you do, if you're in the way, they can bite you.
Yeah.
And if you've provided them for a reason to do so, there's nothing you're going to do about it other than not being close enough for them to get it.
Yeah.
So enough of that. Do I think that these are the horrible, irascible, awful animals of the dreams and nightmares of the many? No, not at all. They're remarkable creatures.
Yeah.
And most of them, if they are acclimated properly and gently, will come to trust you. That's the big difficulty, is getting them to trust you. They are afraid of human beings. Almost all crocs are. The only ones I would say are an exception are the salties and the Niles. But any of the rest of them are really very shy animals.
Yeah.
So,
would you attribute that with the Niles and salties to their proximity to humans, or just to the fact that they are the giants and nothing can really do anything about it?
I don't think it has to do with their size as much as they both have gone through tremendous depredation by man.
Yeah.
And animals respond differently to that. The salties have become very wary, as have the Niles, very, very wary of people, but also they will defend themselves. The Niles have been used as dumping grounds for bodies by one despot after another in Africa.
Makes sense.
I don't know if anybody remembers the name Idi Amin. He killed thousands of people and dumped them in a river system where the Crocs were actually being trained to eat people, eat human bodies.
That's nice.
Yeah. Don't blame the Crocs. That's what they had to eat. That's what you fed them.
Yeah.
Could have been a ham sandwich as far as they're concerned. It was just a convenient way to go.
Sure.
I wish we knew more about their dietary preferences. They're generalists in many cases, unlike what people would like to think. They will eat a lot of different things, and they will eat a lot of invertebrates. Most Crocs, up until probably size of about 7 feet, 8 feet, seem to prefer the invertebrates if they can get them. A lot of nutrition, a lot of fat, a lot of good stuff. Again, I wish that we had the wherewithal to do photo traps by some of these various species. Interesting fact about Cataphractus. In a riverine situation, I don't know if it's the same in the lakes or not. There just aren't enough of them around that we can verify this. In a riverine situation, they will usually mate for life, and they stay as a pair.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's the only croc that I know of that does that.
Wow.
There may be others, but I'm certainly not aware of them.
Okay.
And I've seen this repeatedly. I had a very good friend many, many years ago who spent a lot of time on some of the Congo rivers. I shouldn't say it wasn't the Congo River, but some of the tributaries and so forth, where you would find the mecha stops. And he was always seeing pairs of them at certain times of the day, and they were the same pairs of animals.
Wow.
back in the day when we didn't have lots of movie cameras and video cameras and things. Unfortunate, because that's back in the day when we also had people who were genuine explorers and weren't afraid to get their hands dirty or get bitten by everything else that was out there. Back to breeding.
Okay.
They will breed usually in our area of Florida where we're keeping the animals. They will usually breed in April or May. And they will drop their eggs kind of when they feel like it. And that's the best I can tell you. We've had them drop anywhere from July on up to late September.
Wow. Interesting.
I'd love to tell you that there's some sage reason for that. Whatever it is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just another oddball occurrence, another mystery of the crocodilians.
Interesting.
Yeah. Average nest size that we've observed has been about 23, 24 eggs.
Okay.
That's average. First breedings, as usual with animals, are generally much smaller numbers of eggs.
Sure.
The second breeding usually is much heavier. They are nest builders, and they use detritus and whatever else they can get their hands on to build nests. How in the world they can judge the internal temperature of the nest, I have yet to figure out, and this is true of any of the crocs. They can keep their nests within 1 degree centigrade. And how how do they do it? There are lots of theories. Not many of them hold water.
Wow.
We need to do a lot more work on these guys. For the folks who don't know me, I am a member of the IUCN CITES, SSC, the Species Survival Commission, and the crocodilian group under CITES and SSC, which is Crocodile Specialist Group. Have been for 30 some years that I've been part of the group, and I work with various splinters or divisions of that group, including the veterinary group and the human animal interaction group. These are all things that we have amazingly little information on, and we need a lot more. Yeah. We need to get out there. So speaking of information, I'm going to do my usual splintering into something else for a few moments.
Cool.
My fondness for written material.
Yes.
I'm going to talk about 3 books. It's actually 4 books. These are 4 books that anyone who's really serious about animals, and especially reptiles, should have a look at. First one by Angus Bellairs is called The Life of Reptiles. It's a 2-volume set, and it was originally printed in 1970, I believe. These books are just excellent. They're absolutely excellent. Can you see this one?
Yes.
I don't know what you're seeing, or that's book number 1, and then this is book number 2.
Okay.
You get that one? Okay. Anyone who truly enjoys learning about reptiles, having reptiles, whatever it might be, those books are exceptional. They really are. And if you're wondering why I'm not giving you something that was printed in 2023, it's because this type of book is almost never done anymore. These broad sweeping things where they're taking the entire group as a whole and trying to give you some good authoritative information.
Yeah.
Second book I'm going to give you is Reptiles of the World by Raymond Ditmars, one of the real backbones of herp books. Mm-hmm. Granted, a lot of the information in here is dated. Raymond Ditmars was the curator of reptiles at the Bronx Zoo back when that really, really meant something.
Yeah.
There are photographs in this book and one of the other books that he's done, Snakes of the World, of animals that are currently extinct or that have become extinct. Sad.
Yeah, very sad.
Finally, sort of an updated version of his book, of Ditmars' book, is done by Clifford Pope. The book by Ditmars was done originally in the 30s, and then it was revised a little bit later.
Okay.
It might have been 20s. Let me look. I don't want to give you the wrong information here.
No worries.
Ditmars, I'm sorry, 1922 was the first printing. It was revised in 1933.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a book by Clifford Pope, a remarkably good herpetologist, and it covered the spectrum as best you possibly can in one book for the reptile world. Hence the title,
Yes.
The Reptile World by Clifford Pope. That one was originally printed in 55,
Okay.
and there was an updated version of it in 1974.
Okay.
These are great books, guys. They should be in your library. And of the three, I would say the one that is just absolutely positively a necessity would be The Life of Reptiles by Bellairs.
Okay.
Yet very few people know about that book. So you're welcome.
Yes, good to know. Hopefully some of the listeners take your advice and go add those to the collection.
It's that the information can be trusted. The people who were doing some of this really know what the hell they were doing. They also knew when to say, we don't know.
Sure.
Rather than guessing and coming up with bunnies and unicorns. God, I heard that before somewhere today.
Yeah, I'm not sure where.
I'm not sure where I am sometimes either. That's okay. Back to our cataphractus.
Yes.
The gestation time between the female being fertilized and laying is known only to the animal. Why they do it more quickly sometimes than other times. Like most other crocodilians, they can hold on to the sperm for a while.
Sure.
Somehow they, if conditions aren't just right, they hold off on allowing themselves to get fertile or fertilized, their eggs to get fertilized. We need lots more work on that. Way too often we see things in the print, but more so on the internet, telling us all about these remarkable facts. And the facts are based on nothing other than tripe. We need new people. We need people who are going to work in herpetology. You don't have to be the next great Raymond Ditmars, but even if you have one animal that you particularly like, that you enjoy, do your best to keep some records on it. Do your best to figure out what it likes or what it doesn't like.
Yeah.
And I'm not being anthropomorphic about that. Most reasonably intelligent humans can figure out if an animal likes something or doesn't like something, watching the way it behaves, watching the way it eats, watching the way it does this, that, or the other thing.
Sure.
And I encourage people who have their animals to spend some time with them, sit and watch them, pick them up, look at them, do what you, if it's appropriate. I don't want you picking up your pet king cobra, obviously. And please, no boom slangs or inland taipans.
Yeah.
But I hope everyone understands when I say pick it up, if it's an animal that is easily habituated and, sort of tegu lizard tame, or gecko that is too small to do you any serious harm.
Yeah.
Get to know those animals. Get to know them real well. You may have some of the next great information that we really need on these critters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyhow, once the eggs are laid in the cataphractus, you have about a 90-day time period, give or take a few, I have tried incubating them at several different temperatures. They seem to do best about 29 centigrade, 29 degrees centigrade. That's in the higher 80s. Okay, so what happens? Mom takes very good care of the babies.
Mm-hmm.
We take very good care of the babies. They will eat within about a week of being hatched. And they are reasonably tolerant of each other until they get to be about 3.5 or 4 feet long.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, no more tolerance.
Yeah.
So they have to be separated out at that point in time.
Okay.
If you're going to pair up a pair of cataphractus, you have to be very, very, very slow and very careful, because they will kill each other. And the females will kill the males more often than the other way around.
Okay.
There was a zoo in Central Florida that had a large female cataphractus, and they kept trying to breed her. In the process, they killed off, I think it was 4 males. I'm sorry, 1 male is too many.
Sure.
Any more than that, and shame on you. There's
Yeah.
absolutely no reason for doing something like that. You have a female, you're doing something way wrong, or you have an animal that is, completely off its rocker.
Yeah.
That's also not a technical term. Sorry. And sometimes animals that have been kept in captivity under bad conditions for a long while can become mentally challenged in a lot of ways. They don't act and react the way one would expect a healthy animal to do. So some of that has to be taken into account.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen time and time again. Crocodiles are not pets. We never advocate anyone should have crocodiles as pets or crocodilians as pets. If you absolutely positively must have one, get as much information as you possibly can. Be ready for the fact that this is going to be a large animal, and also be ready for the fact that this animal will be very labor intensive for you if you're going to take care of it well and take care of it correctly. I want to apologize for being even more informal than I normally am. I was, as I said, fixing the boiler, so I got my official boiler fixing outfit on here today with my well-known denim.
Yeah.
If you're going to do something with a crocodilian and you are willing to take a suggestion, and I can't talk you out of having a crocodilian, then probably your best bet is a dwarf caiman.
Yeah.
And get a young one and work with it, talk to it, get it habituated enough so it becomes very, 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 very easygoing and tame. Do they all end up that way? No. And do you need some special talents for doing that? I hate to sound flabbergastingly crazy, but yes, you sometimes really do.
Yeah.
It's not something I can easily teach someone. I've Lord knows I've tried, and even a gentleman who's worked with me now for about 8 years is sometimes amazed about what I can get away with and they can't get away with the same animal.
Mm.
It's beyond what we know. Who knows? How's that for cryptic? Do we have anybody that's asked any questions as of yet?
Not quite yet, but I do have a question, and I'm not sure if this is something that you were going to circle back to, but discussing the whole breeding process struck me that I don't think we've ever really had a conversation about ovulation in crocodilians. Is there? I mean, is an ovulation in a female crocodile something that is obvious to the human eye? Is it?
No, it's not. It's not obvious. Behaviorally, is about the best you're going to do, but morphologically, not really. No. They can, if they're going to have a good sized litter, they can adapt what appears to be like a bell shape to their thorax and gut, with the chest obviously being the narrower part.
Yeah.
Some crocs go to the extreme in that some of the big ones can really get bloated out and start looking like the big Liberty Bell. I wish there was more that we knew about that. Some of the folks from the Crocs Specialist Group have been doing work with that, and I want to give credit to Dr. Sally Isberg and her staff. Sally is part of the Crocodile Specialist Group and one of the lead people in the group. And she's been working with Crocs for many a year and has tried very hard to put together an inclusive society without becoming elitist.
Sure.
So kudos to Sally, and she's had a couple of very difficult things thrown at her. There was a situation in the last year or so where Graham Webb, who was our official chairman for many, many years, had to step down. And this kind of fell in two people's laps, and one of them was Sally.
Mm.
And she was up to it, but it took a great deal out of her, and it really shook her world in many ways. The poor lady was so overworked, continues to be.
That's a shame.
Yeah, they're the sort of, she's a sort of person who I wish we had thousands of working with animals. She's a very intelligent, very tough, but also very compassionate lady.
Mm.
She's quite something. So anyhow, going back to our breeding, once the babies are out, they almost always want to start on invertebrates. They prefer invertebrates.
Okay.
And we usually get them going with some crickets or things like that. Earthworms, by the way, earthworms, dangerous term. I should say night crawlers.
Okay.
The Canadian night crawlers are safe for almost any animal to eat, including us. Man, can you imagine that? Mac and cheese and night crawler. Oh, anyway, yeah. The night crawlers will only survive and breed in soil that hasn't been contaminated. So the Canadian night crawlers, by the very virtue of what they are safe to feed to your animals. Okay. And you may have to snip them up and so on, but they really like them. If you are getting any other type of worm, be very careful. Certain of the worms are poisonous. Some of them are just not very good for the animals. You want to be careful about that. When I say worms, I wanted to codify that.
Okay.
Once they get going, they become remarkably responsive to the person who's taking care of them. If they were going to go back out in the wild, I would strongly suggest that whoever is caring for them does so in a manner that is sort of matter of fact and doesn't try to get too friendly or too close with them, because they do recognize you very quickly, and for lack of a better term, they become quite amiable. They really do. Smart Crocs, as with all Crocs, but they're scary smart. They really, they and the Cubans, I'll tell you, scary smart animals. So growth rate on these guys, if they're being fed correctly, which is not overfed, you're going to see 7 or 8 inches in the first year, and it slows down a little bit as they get larger. But the first few years, they'll have something of a growth spurt, and then they will slow down. They will be ready to breed usually 12 to 14 years old. Okay. How long can they breed? Pa's mate was bred when she was 104 years old. And we had paperwork on her because she came in at the same time he did.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
That's insane.
Yeah, think about that. There's just so damn much we don't know about these animals.
Yeah.
And nobody's doing the work. People are too busy trying to swim with Cuban crocodiles and running for the fence so it doesn't get them. Not exactly my idea of real research.
Yeah, sure.
If the crocodile does get them, again, who suffers? The crocodile will suffer.
Right.
Okay, let's move onward here on the cataphractus. They are critically endangered. They're red listed by CITES and IUCN. We really don't know what's left of their populations other than it's only a fraction of what used to be there.
Okay.
Barely a fraction. The best people can do is guesstimate. It could be 500, it could be 1,000, but it's not going to be very much.
Sure. Okay. Was there ever an idea of what the population was at its maximum in the wild?
No, because historical populations were never anything that was of interest to anyone, and
Sure.
they live in such out of the way places. They weren't a species that, like the Nile, could adapt to heavy presence of man. Nile crocs, one way or another, seem to be able to survive around mankind.
Mm-hmm.
These guys don't want anything to do with mankind, and our very presence is usually enough to scare them off and make them change to another site, another place.
Okay.
They're very timid animals when it comes to that.
Sure.
It's not to saying they won't defend themselves, but they don't want to have to defend themselves. They just want to be left alone.
Okay. So would then human encroachment be a big reason for population decline?
Yeah, that and just out and out killing them for food.
Yeah.
They were found in a relatively wild situation throughout the central part of Africa, wherever there was riverine systems and small ponds or lakes. Now there's just specks here and specks there.
Yeah. Was there ever a period of significant collection for the pet trade, so to speak, or the exotic trade, however you want to say it?
No. There were very few of them brought into captivity for that reason. St. Louis Zoo had an animal that lived for quite a long time. I don't remember how old it was when it died. But anybody who knew about cataphractus knew about the animal at St. Louis Zoo. It was an old male. If a zoo had a cataphractus and it was in good shape and they did a decent job of keeping it well fed, it was usually around for quite some time. Sure. But not many zoos had that species, not many at all. And now if they decide they are going to legitimize the other species, now we've got to look very carefully at what's out there in the captive group and make sure that we're not crossbreeding these animals.
Do we want to go down the rabbit hole of that?
No, not at this point.
Okay.
I have a number of reasons for not wanting to address that, but
no worries.
Some other time.
All right.
If we want to get into systematics, then yeah. But anyhow,
I guess a quick question would be, and we don't have to go into it if this is the start of the conversation, but is the black phase compared to like the, I guess, normal phase, to put a word to it, is that one of the distinctives between what would be species 1, species 2?
No.
Okay.
The animals that are black, melanistic animals, I had the only ones that were ever known to exist.
Okay.
Out of the wild. They were, and people have yelled at me about this over and over again. I know where they came from. The gentleman who brought them into the country or sent them into the country was someone I'd known for years. He was a photographer and sort of an animal guy. He would bring some animals in and try to talk to people about animals and so on. But these animals came out of the Congo.
Okay.
And there is at least one person who will call me all sorts of names for even suggesting that. It's impossible. It's this, it's that. Sorry, that's where they came from. They came out of the Congo. And you've seen my melanistic ones. They are beautiful black animals, gorgeous animals.
They're incredible. I mean, they look like aliens. They truly do.
They do.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have them at many of the shows that we do where we're trying to do fundraising. And we have two that kind of like to get out and see the people here and there. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I would like to tell people who may have seen our animals at various events is crocodilians, if they are stressed, will stop eating. They'll just stop eating. They're no longer comfortable. They're not going to eat for a while. One of the things we always do when we've had animals at a show, and in some cases hundreds of people have touched or held, gotten pictures with, what have you, is we feed those animals the next day. They always eat. And boy, do they eat. And, you know, they were brought up to learn about what we do when we do the shows and things, and they're not being stressed to death by it. It's just another day at the office for them. If you take a croc out of the wild and you don't do anything with it to, you know, realign its thinking about what's going on and give it some time to get used to it, yeah, you could stress crocs out by doing that.
Sure.
As I said, we always feed them the next day. That's just part of our routine. And they will eat right away. They probably eat the same day. As a matter of fact, sometimes we have fed them the same day that we get back. Got some extra food laying around or something, just snap it up. They'll be out there jumping up and down and yelling at us for food. Only part of that is untrue. So these animals have far more behavioral plasticity than people think they do.
Sure.
But they have to be introduced to things in a way that is easy on them. We'll leave it at that for the moment. So how about we talk about one other thing here?
Okay.
I'd like to ask the question of our listeners. I would like to do a group of books or one or two books every time I do one of these podcasts with you. These are things that people don't normally see, they don't hear about, and all you have is the piles of rubbish on the internet. And I'm sorry if I sound unduly harsh, but that's what it is. The information on the internet, as I try to get through people's heads, how do you know what you don't know? Now, that sounds like a little conundrum, but in reality, it's very true. How do you know what someone is telling you on the internet is even close to being true?
Right.
Your whole idea for consulting the internet was to find out something about the animal. If it's nothing that you know, then how do you know that what you're being fed isn't just complete hogwash?
Yeah.
And sadly, a huge amount of it is. Huge, absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And that's often mixed in with a true this or a true that. At least with books where you've got some authoritative people who have written them, people who have backgrounds, serious backgrounds in what they do, that's a whole different story. But please, 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 if you have questions about things, try to find a good book by someone who is an authority, someone who's worked with these animals for their entire lives.
Yeah.
You're going to get a much better case of, hey, that's right, or hey, we know something now.
Sure.
Feeding your gecko jujubes, not a great idea. I've actually seen that one on, I can't even remember what it was, some idiotic thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, you want to do a little nutrition?
Sure. Let's go for it. I guess the one thing I would ask to wrap up the cataphractis talk, are there any current in situ conservation efforts being made in the Congo for these animals?
I wish I could say yes. They're still listed as, basically, we don't have enough information on them to do any more than shrug our shoulders and say we hope they're not as bad off as we think they are.
Sure.
The Congo is an amazing place. The Congo is one of the strangest places on the planet, and it is shrinking day by day by day. If you look at what the Aturu forest it actually is, and it's what most people think of as the deep Congo, there isn't much of it. 90 some square miles, and that's about, or 90 some miles square, I should say.
Wow.
I remember when I was a little kid that it was like the greatest mystery of the dark continent. So it's not that way anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's what's left of the dark continent. There's still a few mysteries in there, but there aren't going to be many left with nonstop wars, battles, poaching, you name it.
Sure.
There was a guy recently who is lucky that I wasn't in the same room with him when he said this, but he was trying to sell gorilla hands, as in hands that had been cut off of gorillas, hardened up with some kind of shellac and used for ashtrays. Think about that. How's that for conservation?
I mean, just make a fake gorilla hand ashtray.
Yeah, well, none of this was fake, and he was trying to sell them for like $30,000 or $40,000 a piece.
Wow.
He was somebody from Malaysia. I'll tell you, it sickens me to hear what has gone on and what has happened to the animals.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Just absolutely sickens me. I watch things where, who in their right mind can justify whaling in 2024?
Whoever's doing it's not justifying it. They don't care.
The only reasonable predation on whales would be from indigenous people who take one or two in a year's time. End of story.
Yeah,
they've been doing it for hundreds of years. Yeah. But other than that, no way.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about nutrition, if we may.
Why
don't you give me a jump off point here? How about a question about nutrition?
Well, I mean, I think the place to start would be there are so many misconceptions and frankly advertisement campaigns that go on these days around nutrition, really with everything. But I guess if we're going to stick to reptiles primarily, I mean, I guess you probably have been around to see the transition. What happened to where all of this terrible information and oftentimes intentionally wrong information started coming out about nutrition?
Say the question part again.
So yeah, I mean, was there a point at which misinformation around nutrition started to become more prominent or
okay, I see which direction you're going here.
Yeah.
Things were actually better when people didn't have this information, I think, in many cases. Hopefully there's been some good information coming out here and there, but it's been so loaded with garbage. It seems to sink it time and time again.
Yeah.
I'll ask you a couple of quick questions here. First of all, do you think that there is more information about humans or more information about other animals when it comes to nutrition?
I mean, I'd hope humans, for our sake.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you that we know almost nothing about nutrition with humans compared to what we could know.
I can imagine so.
Then let's go down the ladder a rung and say, if we know so little about human nutrition, we sure know a lot less about reptile nutrition.
Yeah.
If you want to go down the ladder the right way, then we put dogs in and cats, and then we'd put the reptiles after that, because with the dogs and cats, obviously there's been the veterinary work that's been done with them and breeders and so on and so on and so on.
Sure.
There's still plenty of bad information with them.
And another one that's probably as crucial to reptile nutrition as possible would be that of rodent nutrition. And
Absolutely.
how terrible that has become based on the laboratory industry and creating this empty vessel. And now that's how we feed our feeders for our reptiles, when you look at commercial diets that are available these days.
And the commercial diets, to their defense, were originally instituted so that you had continuity among all the animals when you were working with
Right.
A various cancer, a condition, something that you wanted to make sure these rats were all identical.
Yeah.
Including getting the same food. They all got the same food. Was it the absolute best food they could get? No, it wasn't. It was food that kept them alive and kept them basically hale and hearty.
Yeah.
The food for rodents has gotten a little bit better as years have gone by, but then it took a real nosedive when we started to get all this stuff out of China and some of the other places. Wow.
Yeah.
You used an excellent term, empty vessel. Yeah. It's so true. We could go on about nutrition for days and days and days, and then we could spend even more days about what we don't know about nutrition, what we don't know about how nutrients react, how they are synergistic with other things. It's the synergism in many cases that makes the difference. Yeah. If you take, what do we want to say, vitamin B1, there are 4 common forms of vitamin B1 that are available. For some things, any one of the 4 is fine. For other things, only one of them will work. I'm not going to get into anything of that depth right now, but what I'd like to do is find out if anybody has animals that or questions that I can start applying some of this stuff to. I'm going to throw a bunch of things out here now, things that we don't know or things that we do know.
Yeah.
And have a little bit of fun with that.
Okay.
How about vitamin C? Sodium ascorbate, vitamin C. Do reptiles need it?
I don't know. You don't really see reptile products marketed with vitamin C, so.
No, you don't. Reptiles, they assume, are producing their own vitamin C. If reptiles are healthy and in really good shape, they produce some vitamin C, and it depends upon the species also, very much on the species. It can range all the way from they need quite a bit to they need very little, depending upon the species and their diet.
Okay.
However, vitamin C exists in a bunch of different forms. Vitamin C is a necessity for most reptiles in captivity. They're not getting it from exogenous sources. So they usually will not be producing enough of it to keep them at top-notch health.
Okay. But
then how much do you give them? What's too much? What's too little? We don't know enough about humans to be able to do that. Just recently, they completely redid the recommended daily allowance. Turned out that it was just fiction. They've been using that to raise our kids and, handle our elderly. Recommended daily allowance. Well, God, that's nice. Sounds good. They had no idea what they were talking about. Vitamin D, for instance, and they were usually using vitamin D3 as an example. It was said to be extremely toxic. Well, vitamin D can be toxic, and especially if it's laboratory made from certain places, and certain impurities occur in it as well. But for the most part, vitamin D in large quantities doesn't do you much good, and it doesn't do you much harm. But for years, they were scaring people and telling them they were going to go hypercalcemic and all sorts of bad things were going to happen to them. And it's not really true. As a matter of fact, they found out that we need more vitamin D Did I say C before? I meant D. More vitamin D than anyone ever dreamed we did. Think about it. We used to be naked creatures, and we used to get the sunshine on us constantly.
Yeah.
That's where we get our vitamin D from in a natural setting.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Eskimos didn't do very well on the vitamin D, so they were eating things like fish livers and seal livers to get their vitamin D. We really need vitamin D, and in many cases, the vitamin D was not sufficient for them, and they did suffer from a number of different things because of it. If you want to look at nutrition as a whole, you want to go in with, we know very little. Some of what we know is true. Some of what we hear about is not true. And stick with authoritative stuff. And if you're going to be supplementing, try to use a quality supplement. I use primarily human supplements with the animals because I know the companies and I know what they do. I know how they operate.
Sure.
So I stick with the stuff that I can identify. That's not to say there isn't other good stuff out there. There certainly is. But until you assay it, check it out, find out what it's what is set into and so on. You're looking up at the side there. Do you have a gremlin?
Apparently, I have a gremlin white-lip python that is just raising hell over to my left.
Well, it'll be the last time we invite them to the show.
Yeah, apparently.
Come on, man. No bad behavior at this show. I'm going to restrict you now.
Exactly.
You're going to get only brown rats. That's it.
Yep.
So anyhow, I'm going to jump off again as I've been doing throughout this evening, and I apologize for jumping all over the place. But for doing a holiday show, I wanted to throw some things in here that are important, and this is incredibly important, and it's something that none of the law enforcement people, the animal cops, want to believe or understand. That people develop relationships, as do other animals. They develop relationships with things that are not their species. This is proven. It happens over and over and over and over again. And there are important lessons to be learned by that. Meaning, once again, this plasticity I talked about, behavioral plasticity and neuroplasticity and other things are so damn important. Don't tell me that it's the wrong thing to do, or the little lady down the block who has her pet gecko or something is crazy when she says that she interacts with it.
Yeah.
That's dismissive. If she is getting something out of that, she's interacting with it. If that little animal brings her happiness on some level, and she's taking good care of that animal, they're both benefiting.
Yeah.
There's a mutualism that takes place with that. She is not the same person who should own a rhino iguana, but maybe someone who has a rhino iguana, who's, a person who likes to raise big cyclura, maybe they have developed a relationship with their animals.
I can tell you firsthand that with cyclura in particular, my girlfriend has one of her rhino iguanas in particular. I mean, he's protective of her. He will. I mean, he's like a clingy dog. He'll, if he's been in his cage too long, he's damn near pawing at the front to get out and walk around the house. It's shocking. It's really shocking that this is a reptile, and we have all these perceptions, but
yeah,
it acts more like a dog than a lot of dogs.
You remember probably the first or second time I met you, and we talked about cyclura, and I said they're incredibly dog-like.
Yeah,
there's no two ways about it. They really are, and they are ancient animals. They've been around a long, long time.
Yeah,
and they never cease to surprise me. But they have some very bizarre behavior too. Certain things scare them that will keep them from going into places. On Grand Cayman, one of the biggest problems they had with the blue iguanas, what's left of them, is they put a road called the Queens Highway around the east end of Grand Cayman. All of a sudden, the females wouldn't cross that road to go and dig burrows for their eggs.
Interesting.
Or dig nests. So they effectively kept those animals, even though they could walk across the macadam, they wouldn't do it. They did not like it.
Yeah.
They then tried to transplant animals from one area called the Battle Hill area into an area that to our eyes was identical. They were out of there in no time. They wanted nothing to do with the place.
Yeah.
And yet it seemed to us that the same plants were found there. Everything was about identical to the Battle Hill area. Don't know why. Anagata with Cyclura pinguis. They did the same thing with a road there and just shut down the breeding. Yeah. We don't know what we're screwing up when we do things, and we don't seem to care.
Yeah, seriously.
But yeah, the Cyclura certainly have suffered at our hands. Virtually every species is now endangered.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate. And they were animals that I've worked on since I was, God's 15 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably, I said this in one of our other conversations, I probably am the only person left alive who has seen all of the extant species of Cyclura, including Novas Island, which is now extinct.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
It
was hard to hear that last time, but it just, an unfortunate truth.
Yeah. So back to where we were before, which is nutrition. There are things you can do to be safe about nutrition. There are things that you can do to make sure you're at least making an attempt at getting some of the micronutrients that these animals need.
Yeah.
Question is, how much is enough? How much is too much? There are nutrients, and this is where it gets incredibly complex. As I was telling you about synergy, that synergy with certain elements is incredibly important. Or you have, let me come up with a good one here. How about we go with berberine? Berberine is a brightly colored substance found in a number of plants and fruits, and it has a significant antibiotic effect. It also stimulates the immune system, and I could go on for an hour about berberine. Berberine is really remarkable stuff. It is tolerated well by most animals. You can combine it with other things to make it more powerful as far as getting their health up and around and get them going.
Okay.
But there are some restrictions on berberine. There are a couple of groups of animals that berberine doesn't do any good for. And one of them is the chameleons. I do not know why. It doesn't seem to hurt them per se, but it doesn't seem to have the really positive effects that it does on some of the other animals.
Yeah.
And I brought this up once before, which is the immunomodulator indigo, wild indigo root. It's the most powerful immunomodulator and stimulator that we know of. And recently, they just made it illegal to sell in the United States. Why? It was one of those quietly pulled under the table somehow. And next thing you know, it disappears.
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
Well enough.
I can make some pretty good guesses.
Yeah.
I don't like to guess, but a few people were doing some work on it and finding out that the stuff was unbelievably effective. Well, anything that threatens our good friends at the big pharmaceuticals
Yeah.
They're going to squeeze it out one way or another. And it seems like that's what happened to that. If somebody knows more than I do about it, please tell me. I'd love to know.
Yeah.
I have used it as part of a preparation for immunostimulation and immunomodulation for years. And it is especially effective in reptiles. I have not seen any ill effects from it at all. I usually use it in tincture form, which is an alcohol base, ethyl alcohol base. It's incredible stuff. You get some of these iguanas, and I'm talking about green iguanas, that are on death's doorstep. And they've got 16 different infections going on. They've had nothing but bad nutrition.
Yeah.
The wild indigo root is one of the things that will help pull them out of it, and do so remarkably quickly. And I'm going to throw my favorite story about iguana stuff. Everybody knows that you shouldn't feed too much protein to iguanas, right?
Right.
Okay.
I hope
The healthiest iguana I've ever seen was a male that was over 6 feet in length. It was 6 foot 2 inches long, big strapping male. And I said, "What are you feeding this thing?" People who brought him to me said, "Oh, his favorite, which is cheese." That's all they ever fed that iguana. For as long as they had it, it got nothing but cheese. The thing was a monster. It's an absolute monster. I'm not trying to tell you this is the right thing to feed it. All I'm telling you is, with my very own little eyes, I saw this monstrous iguana, and he's good-tempered too. He was very easygoing. They brought him in because he had torn out a toenail, which iguanas do frequently when they get onto a screen.
Yeah.
And I patched him up a little bit and put him back where he belonged, in their hands. But God, I had no idea what to say. I guess make sure it's not Velveeta.
Yeah.
You know, have you ever tried macaroni with it? I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. I am stumped by that one. That thing shouldn't have had any kidneys left.
Surprising.
Fine.
Eat cheese.
They said that he had been with them for 16 years.
Wow.
How's that for remarkable, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really keep an iguana around that long by mistake.
No, and especially not one that is hale and hearty and friendly.
Yeah.
And he was all of the above. Good color on him too. Very, very vibrant color.
Wow.
So come to Wisconsin, get the cheese. Okay. Back to almost being serious here.
Okay.
Things that you can do. We're going to cover some of this in the future, but some of the bits and pieces of nutrition that you really must have and that you really should be doing with your animals. Just because it's a reptile doesn't mean that they all get the same nutrition.
Sure.
Just because a bonobo is a sort of a humanoid type critter and the closest thing to us that's out there doesn't mean that it processes things the same as we do.
Yeah.
Although probably does mostly. If you looked at other mammals, you've got animals that will eat nothing but snails. You've got animals that will eat nothing but this or nothing but that. So with reptiles, think about it, look at what they eat in the wild and see if it gives you any hints.
Yeah.
And then start asking questions and start reading about real nutrition. One of the biggest eye openers I ever had was when I read a very well done book on synthesis in nutrition and what happens with it, and realized that for any calcium that you're trying to get into an animal, there's anywhere from 12 to 15 actions and reactions that have to take place, and other elements that have to be present at various stages before the stuff can actually be assimilated.
Okay.
So just giving an animal calcium is by no means enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's harmful, sometimes it does nothing. In humans, so often it's just, it ends up in the toilet. That's where it goes right on through, doesn't stop, say hello,
Yeah, sure.
off it goes. Most people are very poor at utilizing exogenous calcium. And we're just now beginning to learn that you've got to combine it with a bunch of stuff and make sure that you have all of that in place under the right conditions, and on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah,
Stupidly complicated.
sure.
So what's your favorite as far as adding anything to your foods? Do you add anything?
Just anything at all.
Yes.
I mean, I would probably start with salt. Can't go wrong with that.
You can, but not if you do it right.
From a taste standpoint, I guess.
Yeah. Are you still there?
I am.
Okay.
I hear you, but the screen is frozen temporarily. If you can hear me, Terry, I would just exit out and come back into the stream through that link I sent you. Something's up with the connection. The government
Right now.
Talking about salt. Okay, here you are. I can see you now.
Okay. I don't know what's going on. It's really fritzy. We have had fighter jets in the air around the area that I'm in, and sometimes the signal will get completely mucked up by their communications.
Interesting.
Anyhow, salt is a necessity. The salt that carries the best load of micronutrients is the Gallic salt. In small amounts, harmless to the animals and probably very beneficial. The Tibetan salt, probably the second best, is the pink salt. Each of those have anywhere from 70 to 90 micronutrients in them, a little bit sprinkled here or there, or sprinkled on a prey animal. Can do some good and give them a little help. Kelp is also a good thing for most animals. I don't know that I've ever seen toxicity from it. I've never used that much of it. But for instance, most of my snakes are going to get a kelp tablet, depending upon their size, a kelp tablet or a proportion thereof about once a month. Kind of just kicks something back into their diet that they are not normally getting.
Sure.
Hello.
You might need to try to re-enter the stream again. Apologies, everybody who's still here, for the technical difficulties as we're getting into the nitty-gritty of nutrition. While my white lip python just raised as hell in the background, just being a great audience member for the podcast. Very much appreciated. I don't know if it's coming through or not. Let's see. Anything? Well, all right. I mean, I guess to kill a little time. Yeah, what a year. It's been crazy doing the podcast. This is, being 41 episodes in seems strange. I don't know. I still feel like I'm brand new to it. And at the same time, it feels like I've been doing it forever, because, I have been doing podcasts off and on in some capacity or another for, the last 5 years or so. But yeah, doing the weekly show for as long as I have, it probably is the longest stretch of routine podcast that I've done. But like in the past, I had always been kind of in the co-host role, so to speak, with MJ leading the, leading the shows. So, it's been a transition for sure to try to, and I feel like I'm still learning how to really, be the best host that I can, be able to format a conversation that's, not only informative, but also fun and casual, and one that doesn't seem too scripted or bullet point. I feel like the best podcasts are always the ones that feel like a conversation that you're listening to two people have at the bar at Tinley Park or something like that. So that's, that's kind of what I try to go for. And, a lot of other people do the same format in a great way. I'm currently working my way through the episode from last night on All the Tree Tuesday with Gary Scavino. And I've been enjoying that greatly so far. And, those guys on Tuesday night, they do a great job of that as well, of being, having it seem like just a table at the bar at the show, talking about reptiles, talking about the business side of things. That's always a very fun type of setting to be in. And one that we can't all, we can't all necessarily be a part of all the time, whether that be based on ability or lack of ability to get to a show or something like that. Or, if you're a newer person in the industry and don't have those kind of connections yet, then you might be at a show and be a little bit intimidated to try to go up to some of those people. That was me for the longest time, and probably even still now to a certain degree. That's why it's just, I don't know, it's so great. And the amount of information that's out there it's crazy to think about, but then also kind of to what Terry has been speaking about. You also need to be able to find the right information, find the good information, and, have the ability to kind of clear the weeds, so to speak, and, really be able to pick apart the good from the bad. And that's the biggest challenge when there's an abundance of information, and and then the quality inevitably will not be strong throughout. So, and I'm not trying to sound elitist or whatever, but I really, I try to do my best to bring on guests that I feel like are really pushing the narrative, doing good work, doing cutting edge work. Someone like Terry, the amount of stories that I've heard from him over the years are just, it's fascinating. So to get information like that onto a platform where it's going to, be present for as long as the internet is, to me is super important. We have the opportunity to do so. So that, to not do that would be tragic. It would be a loss of information, because, truly there's been the amount of information we've lost over time. You don't even really want to think about it, because it's going to be just kind of depressing. But, aside from the servers all going down and us going back to the Stone Age, as long as the internet's still a thing, this is the easiest time it's ever been to truly do that, to truly compile that type of information. So, the fact that like the Morelia Python radio archives are going back, 15 years or so now. I'm off on that number probably a little bit in one direction or the other, but to be able to, even with that example, like listen to a really old episode about carpet pythons, and then a more recent episode about carpet pythons, and see how the information has changed, see how views have evolved. It can really be fascinating, especially when it comes to like trying to continue that thought process, that mindset of always being, looking towards what's the next piece of information that, that's necessary to what we're doing or whatnot. And then also, realizing that this is, information is never a static thing, that, if you're not always looking to learn whatever is there to be learned, then you're, inevitably doing something, pretty incredibly wrong. So yeah, I'm trying to, and this is also for me learning as well. This is just like, I have the opportunity to have these conversations in a public forum, but they're for me first and foremost, and then for whoever, wants to listen secondarily. So, anyone who I can bring a little bit of positivity to one way or another, I'm all for it. That's definitely, I benefited greatly from many people before me who were doing these, podcasts and YouTube videos and stuff like that. So I'm always a big, like, pay it forward kind of person. The amount of stuff that I've been, given by mentors and friends and whoever throughout the years, you can't pay them back. You can in small ways of, your time and whatnot, but the way that I see it, the truest way is to just pay it forward to whoever you can now help next, because inevitably whoever helped you out was helped out by their mentor before them, and then whoever you help out, ideally they'll help out their generation following them. So something that I always try to think about. I always try to keep those things in perspective. This industry's got a lot of big egos and a lot of people who their opinions in themselves drive a lot of people away from them. And I think as many of us, and with that said, most people are not that way. I'd like to think that nobody who has been on this show is that way. And those are just voices I'm not interested in hearing from. They make themselves heard one way or another, but that's definitely not for me. And then I think I can probably speak for a lot of the listeners where, those types of people really don't interest them, because at a certain point, you can only listen to some, self-aggrandizing person for so long without, just kind of getting tired of it. Which I often find myself, especially it's hard to avoid that type of stuff when you're new and acquiring new information, especially if YouTube is the place where you start, which, for better or worse, and probably for better, is a great place to start. But then if you stay in that very narrow lane of the most vocal people in those fields, then inevitably you're gonna suffer the hopefully not too long-term consequences of, getting this information that's being push through this very narrow viewpoint of somebody who's been locked into their perspective for 20, 30 plus years or whatever. And their ego is so inflated that they're not willing to listen to any sort of new information, even if that new information is wrong, not even willing to consider it. And that's, I remember we had a podcast back in the Unfiltered days with one person who's still really prominent in the industry. And I'll never forget it. This is the moment where I really started to question this guy's integrity, and now it's somebody who I very much dislike. Not to put names to it, but it was the topic of venom in monitor lizards, and I just asked about it, like, what are your thoughts on this research? And he just dismissed it instantly. It was like, nope, no interest, next question. And I didn't press, but I found it really interesting. Like, wow, this is somebody who's been working with monitor lizards for decades. And, you may have your opinions on this, but the fact that you weren't even willing to consider it mentally, that was really eye-opening to me, where it's like, okay, you claim to be this expert in this particular aspect of our field, but potential new information from legitimate scientists has become available, and you're not even willing to look at it, even for the sake of critiquing it. That's just, I don't know. I found it, that was a very like transformative moment for me of like, okay, this is good to know that people, that this type of person, has found so much prominence, and like, this is probably somebody I should avoid. And then over the next couple of years, I had some major things that I saw where I was like, wow, I think I may have been onto something back then about this individual. So yeah, anyway, not sure if Terry's coming back, so we might be wrapping up the episode after 10 minutes of rambling or so. Maybe his device died or something like that, but we are closing in on 2 hours, and tonight was only going to be a little bit of an introduction to the nutritional stuff, which truly, we could do a podcast every week about nutrition and probably not run out of material. So it's one thing that I think with all of the marketing campaigns about lighting and supplements and, you know, the powders, the this, the that, the biggest thing that nobody, for the most part, talks about is, you know, the UV lighting. So for, you know, for instance, that's just a means of metabolizing. If your nutrients aren't there to metabolize in the first place, then that lighting is pointless, truly. You know, there's obviously plenty of data to suggest that reptiles can live very long, healthy lives without supplemental UV lighting. But what if there were ways, or there are ways, what if ways were pursued to have a more complete naturalistic diet, more micronutrient dense, more mineral dense diet, that lighting of that sort could actually benefit within the synthesis of some of these, you know, some of these micronutrients and minerals. That's the stuff that interests me. Anything that's a pitch, that doesn't really interest me. Anything that's a new product that somebody can mass produce, that doesn't really interest me very much. You know, what interests me more is the true like mechanics of it at a base level, and then, you know, and then use the tools that are at our disposal to achieve those goals. But, you know, goal first, maybe then product later, instead of product first, and then I'll tell you what, you know, the product says I'll fix this or that or the other thing. Here are my no studies about it and my no data, but here's my colorful ad. And here's my no product history because I never tested the product. I just made it and put a reptile on the package. So, you know, be careful out there. Don't get screwed over by crafty salesmen. And, you know, keep an open mind to everything. And approach it from the most kind of critical, matter-of-fact way you can of, you know, start with the issue you want to address, and then work up to how do I attack this from different angles, instead of, ooh, look, shiny product, let me buy it, and then figure out what my purpose is later on. So anyway, with all that said, I think I do fear we are not getting Terry back this evening, which is okay. That was a great show. I always, you know, I love crocodilians. Unfortunately, I don't have any in my possession at the current moment in time. I would definitely love to work with crocodilians again, but there aren't many people who, for one, have the depth of knowledge of crocodilians that Terry has, but then also are willing to share that knowledge. It's a very guarded sector of our industry, and a lot of times for very good reason as well. You know, for the reason that people have dedicated their lives to this. There's major conservation issues at stake with them, and then also they're not animals that are for everybody. But with that all said, I absolutely love learning about crocodilians, talking about crocodilians, and African slender snouted crocodiles are of the species. I've probably worked with 13 or 14 crocodilian species, maybe 15. I mean, they're up there for me with the most unique, amazing of these crocodilians. So to have, you know, an hour plus about talking about slender snouted crocs, that was pretty incredible. So anyway, inevitably on a future Terry show, we'll get deeper into some of these topics of nutrition. But with all that said, and with 15 minutes of rambling under my belt for the night, I'll kind of close us out over here. So again, thank you to everybody who was in the live chat tonight, especially this time of year. You know, it's a holiday time, so I'm very, very grateful for your time, the listeners out there and the viewers, to spend with me this evening, and to everybody who is listening after the fact, either here on YouTube or on any of the streaming services, Spotify, Apple, etc. Very much appreciated. Again, if you're here on YouTube, a subscribe would be wonderful. New shows every single day of the week. when it is regularly scheduled. We're doing a little bit of the holiday break right now, but back in January, we'll be back to 7 days a week of the absolute best reptile content that is out there these days. For me, I'm on Instagram at scrubshepherd. I'm just Stephen Kush on Facebook, and I'm here every Wednesday on the Trap Talk Reptile Network. So, with all that said, another great episode in the books. Thank you, everybody, for watching, listening. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, all that good stuff. And I'll catch you back here in a couple of weeks for another new episode. Good night.